About 5 years ago, an elderly lady told me that she put crocodiles in the Canal Saint-Martin of Paris. About 3 years ago, my wife Lena and I turned the story of the crocodiles in Paris into a best-selling children's book. About 2 months ago, I was invited by Spilling the Beans, which is an evening of storytelling in Paris and run by the Peloton Cafe. I was invited to tell the story of the crocodile to a crowd full of Parisians. You are about to hear a recording of what happened that night, and all I can really say is even if you think you know this story, there's a huge twist coming at the end, and to best enjoy what you're about to hear, I think you need to imagine that you're sitting in the room with everybody. Not least because there's a lot of background noises going on. See if you can hear towards the end when it really gets tense, you can hear someone drop their glass of wine, which kicks off a kind of nervous laugh of relief. But anyway, imagine you're in the room with us. Here comes one of my most famous stories with a new twist. My name is Oliver G. This is the Eiffel Tower podcast, and K is for Kylie the Crocodile.
The last person is Oliver G, a little bit of a superstar in Paris. He's also a friend, and he is from New Zealand. No, he's from he's from Australia. He lives in Paris.
You don't know anything about it.
I don't know. He hosts the award-winning podcast, The Eiffel Tower. And buckle up because he is about to share a monstrously entertaining story.
Hello. Okay. This one's a bit different from the other stories, I think. But this story begins by the Canal Saint-Martin about 5 years ago. And I was sitting down there having some drinks with some friends. And as Paul mentioned, I'm Australian, I think you mentioned. That's going to come back. So I was sitting by the canal, looking out at the water, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye something was swimming in the water. I saw the head of an animal that looked smaller than a dog, bigger than a rat. And I had a reaction. What could this be? As I said, I was Australian. We don't get many wild animals in Paris. So I was excited. I was really excited. I jumped up. I couldn't figure why people weren't making a bigger deal about it. But I started running after this animal, trying to figure what it could be. Upstream, people were ignoring me, but I was like, look, I think it's a beaver. Right? I was fascinated, right? Totally fascinated. No one seemed to share my fascination at all, but that's all right. The next day, first I came back to my friends. I said, the beaver, they didn't care. I was like, okay, we'll get back to this. The next day I went to work and I told my Parisian colleagues, I was like, you're never going to believe it. I saw a beaver swimming in the Canal Saint-Martin last night. And it was really interesting because there was a really divided reaction. Firstly, people, for me, really divided reaction. They were like, nonsense. There's no way there are beavers in Paris. And I was like, well, I saw what looked like a beaver. There's a beaver. And others were like, yeah, there could be a beaver. And I was like, why is everyone disagreeing on this? There was definitely a beaver. And I got quite confused by it. But I figured there must be more of a story. So at around this time, I was starting up the podcast that Paul mentioned, the Eiffel Tower, and I was looking for stories, looking for things a little bit different in the city. And I thought, this beaver story could be huge. So I went down to I sense you guys agree with me. I went down to the canal with my microphone and I figured I'd talk to anyone and everyone looking for answers. I figured this could be a kind of like a Loch Ness monster kind of conspiratorial story. Is there a beaver in the canal? And obviously everyone cares about it. As you can tell by the reactions tonight, I'm glad. So I was down there and I got the microphone. I just went up to anybody and everyone. I was like, do you think there's a beaver in the canal? And people, it was cool. Like some people, the same thing. Yeah, people were either going, yeah. Some people were going, yeah, maybe. I don't care. But some people were going, no way, there's a beaver. But did you know 2 years ago they dredged, so they emptied the whole canal. I don't know if you guys remember this, about 8 years ago maybe. They dredged and they found all kinds of things down there. They found like laptops, guns, knives, scooters, jewelry, so on. And one guy said, yeah, they even pulled out a body. And I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be a story about that. Not at all. He was wrong. I don't know where that came from. Don't worry. But I was pretty satisfied that I had a good story for the podcast about this beaver, right? And then we decided we'd wrap up for the day and we were going to call it quits. We had enough interviews for a good story, a damn good story. And so we were heading back, and as I was walking along the canal, imagine this, between those two, like near that big green arch bridge from the Amélie movie. As I was walking, I saw an older lady sitting on one of those green park benches, and she was looking out very sort of calmly and wistfully over the water, almost as if she was looking for something. In her eyes, almost a kind of fear I sensed. Also in those eyes, I noticed a sort of mischievous quality, the kind of woman that maybe had 1,000 stories to share. I don't know, honestly, this is true. I felt drawn to this energy, like magnet energy. And I was like, I have to, even though I was finished, I was like, I have to talk to this lady and I have to ask her about the beaver. I don't know why. But this conversation that I had with this woman literally changed my life and is the reason I'm standing here telling you this story tonight. As I sit down, feeling this energy, I knew I wasn't just going to say, have you seen the beaver? I was like, we're going to do this right. So I said, what are you doing here? Do you like the canal? Tell me about it. And we get chatting. And I said, do you like the canal? And she spoke English. I've recorded everything, by the way. You can hear it if you want. I said, do you speak English? She said, naturally. That's how she talked. It's kind of one of her catchphrases is naturally. And I said, what do you think of the canal? She said, I like sitting, I'll do the accent. I like sitting here and looking over the water, and sometimes I see the birds. And so she brings up the animals, and this is the moment. And I say, do you think there might be animals in the Canal Saint-Martin? And she says, naturally. So I'm like, okay, what sort of animals? And she says, well, there's the birds and there's a fish. And then she paused and I saw that mischievous look. I sensed there was something there. So I asked the question and I said, do you think there could be a beaver swimming in the Canal Saint-Martin? And she paused and she looked once again like she was looking for something. And she said, yes, there could be beavers. And then she paused. And then she said, I didn't say anything, she just said, there are also crocodiles in there. So I said to this woman, this old mysterious woman, I said, how do you know there are crocodiles in the Canal Saint-Martin? And she said, because I put them there. At this point, I had literally had a million questions, and I asked every single one to her, and she had a good answer for every single question. So I was like, how big were they? She was like, they were quite small, but too big for my apartment. I was like, where did you release them? She said, just over there on that bridge. And I said, realizing that the canal had been dredged 2 years ago, I was like, let's test her here. I was like, when did you release them? Figuring if she said 3 years ago, they would have found them, right? And she goes, just under 2 years ago. So I'm thinking this story is quite legitimate. And obviously, at this point, beaver story out the window. Don't care anymore. This is a crocodile story. So I got all the information that I needed for what I considered would be a great story, except her name, never to find her again. But I was like, this crocodile story is going somewhere. So the first thing that I did is I went to the local town hall, and I went to the mayor of the local town hall, and I said, and this is all recorded so you can hear this. I said, listen, what do you know about crocodiles in the Canal Saint-Martin? And he says, oh my gosh, this is like the 1980s all over again.
And I said, what happened in the 1980s? And he said, I've said too much. So I started Googling around. I'm like, crocodile, 1980s, Paris, what's the story? And lo and behold, on the old newspaper articles that uploaded to the internet, in 1984, you can see this is true. In 1984, they were noticing around Pont Neuf in the sewers that there was an unusual decline in the rat population. And the pompiers, the firefighters, went down into the sewers, this is true, and found a 1-meter crocodile in 1984, and they saved it or took it out, and they sent it to, according to the newspaper, a animal park in Western France. So I was like, got to figure this out. I Googled around Western France crocodile 1984, and I got a hit the Aquarium de Vannes in Brittany. And I'm recording this as well. I called the aquarium, and I said, is it true that the firefighters in Paris sent a crocodile to you in 1984? And she said, oh, you mean Eleanor? So she said, yeah, Eleanor, she's 40 years old, she's 3 meters long, she weighs 100-something kilos, you can come and visit her if you want. And I was like, I'm on my way. So we went out there to Brittany, and it's true, they had organized this enclosure to look like the Paris sewers. They had like a sign that said like Rue de something or whatever. And they took me behind the scenes to get up close and personal with this crocodile, which was amazing. I was like, okay, all I need now is a quote from an expert for the story to be finished. I called a marine biologist, who was my brother, incidentally, but still a marine biologist. I said, listen, if there were crocodiles released about 2 years ago in Paris, what could they survive? What would happen, etc.? And he said, well, the first thing to think about is I think they could survive. They can handle these kind of temperatures. He said in 2 years they would have grown to about 1 meter long. He said they could survive by eating local rat populations or maybe beavers. But the thing he said that was the most important to consider was, he said, have you thought that it could be a male and female, which could be a breeding pair? Meaning there could be more crocodiles coming into the canals of Paris. I was like, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a great way to finish the story. So I put out the episode. This is in the really early days of the podcast. It really went well. A lot of people listened to it. It got written up in newspapers around the world, on radio around the world. I think people love the idea of this kind of Loch Ness story. Anyway, fast forward to the first lockdown of Paris, and with absolutely nothing to do, I was sitting there with my wife, Lena, who's an artist, an illustrator, a shoe designer, and we were like, let's try and pull some kind of creativity out of this situation and this story. So I wrote the words to a children's book, and Lena illustrated it, and we were like, we had literally no idea what we're doing, but we made it about this crocodile. We picked one of the crocodiles, called her Kylie, because it rhymes a little bit with crocodile. Wrote this children's book, and we were like, we're going to self-publish it. We got no idea how the industry works or anything. If people are interested, we'll make the copies and we'll sell them or whatever. We'll see what happens. And this is, 3 years ago now? Lo and behold, it went absolutely gangbusters. People like the story. And even to this day, yesterday, I delivered boxes of them to the Louvre Museum where they're on display in the boutique right there. So this story really got legs. It's in all the bookshops of Paris. It's in the Peloton Cafe as well. And what I want to sort of end with here is the moral to the story, which is, firstly, they're swimming in the Canal de l'Ourcq right now. Don't do that. That's part of it. But I think a good way to give a moral to this story is to quote from the children's book that ends with, like, if you go down to the canal, it goes, but maybe think twice before dipping your feet, because feet are a crocodile's favorite treat. And crocodiles bite even when they look smiley, so look but don't touch if you ever see Kylie. There's an unexpected twist to this story that I was saving. I think a few of you heard this story, but there's more. I've told this story loads over the years. People have interviewed me about the interview, and the thing that people always ask me is they go, do you believe the old lady? That's what people always ask me. And my answer is I don't really know. Like, it's a great story. I don't know if I believe the old lady, but I like the story. And with time, I wondered whether maybe the crocodile was simply a figment of the old lady's imagination. With more time, I began to wonder whether the old lady was a figment of my imagination. So knowing I'd be here tonight with you guys, knowing that some of you had heard part of that story before, I wanted to add something new. So I went back, for the first time, this is true, I went back and listened to the whole long, unedited interview. So we cut down the interview with the lady to the best bits, but I re-listened to the unedited bit, trying to find a clue to find her again. And would you believe it? She, in the middle of the episode, she dropped her name and said how rare it was, and the name was Litva. I was like, that is an unusual name. I'm like, just once again, I'm on the hunt for Litva now. Forget the crocodile. The story's Litva. Would you believe it? There is only one Litva in France, so it was quite easy to find that she once had an art gallery in the Marais, like a studio for painting. And this is all happening yesterday, right? So yesterday I go to this art studio, knock on the door, hoping to find Litva, hoping that she's still there, hoping she'll remember me if she is there. And unfortunately, a young man opened the door. And he said his name was Martin. And I said, I'm looking for Litva. And he said, that's my mom. And I said, many years ago, she told me a story, and I'm here looking for closure. He gave this kind of weird, maybe inherited look, a knowing look, as if to say, you're not the first, buddy. So he says she'll be back in 2 hours. 2 hours later, I went back, knocked on the door, and I can't explain it. I was really nervous. Firstly, to meet the lady again, whether she'd say, you believed that? Knowing how much I'd built on this, but also, I was really nervous to show her the book we made because Lena drew her in this book. She's in a book that's being sold all over the place. I was like, what if she doesn't like it? This could be problematic. So the door opens, and it's Litva 5 years later. And my heart's beating just thinking about it. And I said, Litva, the crocodile tamer, do you remember me? And she says, naturally. So I said, Litva, I think you should sit down because I've got a big story to tell you. And I sat down with her and I told her the whole story that I've just told you guys, but in greater depth. And she loved it. She was laughing. She was clapping. She was cheering. I swear, I recorded a bit because she was so into the story. And then the moment that I've been waiting for, I said, there's more. I said, there's more, Litva. I see you've got an art studio. My wife is an artist. We've turned this story into a book, and I'd like to read it to her. I said, I'd like to read it to you. So I opened this children's book, and it was like a little reading session. I read this book. Especially nervous when it came to the page where there's a picture of her carrying the crocodile down to the canal. But she loved it, and she just really loved it. And it was a real heartwarming moment to get a kind of closure on the story. And in kind of wrapping things up here, I think I said before the moral is don't dip your feet in the canal Saint-Martin, but I think there's also a moral here in that you can never underestimate the value or the magic of daring to have a conversation with somebody on the park bench next to you in Paris, right? And before I left the art studio, I said to Litva, I said to her and her son Martin, I said, tomorrow night I'm going to be performing this exact story to a room full of Parisians. And I said, I wonder if you'd like to be in the audience. Wow. And you know what she said? Naturally. So, I want to dedicate this story from one storyteller, in fact, from a room full of storytellers, to the ultimate storyteller, to Litva the crocodile tamer, who is sitting right in front of me in the front row. There she is, everybody. Thank you, Litfa, and thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for organizing. I'm Oliver G. Have a lovely night.
So there you have it. I just listened to it again. It was that was a fun story. I enjoyed hearing it myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as well. Some behind the scenes at the end of it, we'd brought a bunch of the books, Kylie the Crocodile, along, and we were signing them for people. And it turned out Litfa was signing them too. And in it, she just wrote the word naturally with her signature underneath. A huge thanks to everybody who came out. Spilling the Beans is the name of their program. They do it semi-regularly. Check them out, Spilling the Beans in Paris. If you want to get your own copy of Kylie the Crocodile, you can find it anywhere online. But my favorite way for people to buy it is the EiffelTower.com/shop. That way you cut out all the middlemen and we can send it directly to you. And a big thanks to the Patreon members who heard this episode straight after I performed it. You can get similar perks, patreon.com/the Eiffel Tower. I'll be sharing some behind the scenes pictures with members this week. And I'll be sharing some pictures of Litfa and I that I've been holding on to. I didn't want to give it away. I'll share them on social media at the Eiffel Tower at some point during this week. Now, talking about Patreon perks, last week I took everyone on a walk through the Ile Saint-Louis at 9 o'clock in the morning. A really beautiful walk, and it was so lovely actually. There were sailing boats and kayaking down on the Seine, just off the right bank there. It was part of the video. If you're not a member, you can sign up and watch the replay of it. Loads more videos. I'm doing them a lot more, so that's how you can support the show and get something in return. Now, the music that you heard at the start and at the end here by Pres Maxson, our maestro of music, and he says, for K, and in honor of Kylie, it's my spin on a song by Kylie Minogue. First off, I can't believe, and I'm very sorry that I haven't covered Kylie on the Eiffel so far, a generational talent and an obvious tie to our crocodilian friend. This song is called Into the Blue. And if one were to release a croc into a canal, one would have this perfect for the moment lyric, tonight I'm running free into the blue. Thank you very much, Pres, and for all your music, of course, over this season. As for this AB season, the alphabet season of Paris and France, I'm really enjoying it. I hope you are too. A clue for next week is we are leaving the confines of Paris. That's all I'm saying. Enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. My name is Oliver G. This is the Eiffel Tower podcast. Thank you for listening. Merci beaucoup. And au revoir.